Hi, Dr. Snyder. I wanted to give you a short presentation regarding the two different types of self-help meetings that I attended in response to our assignment this semester for addictions class, Counseling 613. So I chose to do two different types of meetings, both connected to addiction in different ways. And the first was a traditional 12-step meeting in A, and then the second was a support group for the families of those in addiction. So I will just jump right in by telling you about the two groups. The first, as I mentioned, was called Finding Hope, and this is a meeting that is an offshoot of a ministry from Oklahoma. I think they've expanded into other states. I live in Oklahoma, but it's called Hope is Alive, and it is a Christ-centered recovery program, and they have sober living facilities around our city. It's really an incredible program. So through Hope is Alive, they have support groups called Finding Hope, and those are specifically for family members of a person in addiction. So they meet the first and third Thursday of every month from 6:30 to 8 p.m. at a local church. There's several to choose from. This was just the closest one to me. The church is called Crossings Community Church. And it's open to the public. I didn't have to register. I apologize, my video is covering some of my words there, but no registration needed is what that says. And I will tell you more about that group later in this presentation. But the second group that I attended was a traditional 12-step group, specifically NA. This was a closed group. You did not need registration, but you did need to either be someone who is seeking support and help of a 12-step program for addiction, specifically narcotics, or be the guest of someone. And I have a friend who is in recovery, and so I attended this group as a guest. I didn't have to register, but I only knew about the group. Well, I knew about the group because they're listed online, but I was able to go to the group because of my friend. They meet every Thursday, 52 weeks out of the year, at a church that is downtown, Chisholm Trail Presbyterian Church, from 7 to 8 o'clock. And they don't allow guest drop-ins just for the purpose of an assignment, just to protect the anonymity and just to respect those who are there working the program. I found that was common. I also attempted to attend a Celebrate Recovery group and discovered, I called a couple, and they are also closed for confidentiality reasons. So they said I could go to the opening part, the beginning, where there's like some worship and someone shares a testimony, but once they broke into their recovery groups, they don't allow guests in those groups, and I honestly really respect that. And I learned so much about what our city has to offer as it relates to addiction groups. The information I gathered on the internet, I found both of these groups just through Google searches, but I found so much more information is super helpful. So I feel like I have a much better handle on what there is to offer in Oklahoma City. So as I look at the experiences of both groups, there were some things in common, I felt like, and then there were some things that were different in each group, as you would expect. So with the Finding Hope group, I think there were 10 total around a round table, and they were in a classroom. They both met in churches, but this was more of like a traditional classroom setting with like a whiteboard and coffee pot and all of that kind of stuff. There was a leader, and she designated herself as the leader. She introduced herself as, I'm so-and-so, and I lead this group, and we're so glad you're here. Showed me to a seat, asked me to fill out a piece of paper with my name, email, phone number, and then they gave me a book. They gave everyone a book their first time, and it was written by Lance Lang, who is the founder of Hope is Alive, and it kind of shares his addiction story, and his heart is for families because of everything his parents went through when he was living in his addiction. And so that was all like right at the beginning. They had cookies, they offered me a snack, and then they just jumped right in. Everyone else around the circle had been there before, so I was the only new person, and they didn't require for me to register or anything. I was able to just come in, and they let anyone in. Since this is not a group for people in recovery, but for their family and friends, and it's open to anyone in the community. And they started out by sharing. It was a around, and it was a scaling question, using some of my terms I've learned from the program. And the leader just gave a small, brief definition and said, we're going to start out by sharing how our week has been between the numbers of 1 and 10. I was the fourth one to go, and I did share in that group. I felt comfortable sharing because I didn't feel like I needed to earn the right to share by being someone who struggles with addiction. I just was there. And actually, my dad has a gambling addiction, so I shared that with the group. I do relate to some of the feelings that some of the group members shared. So anyway, I gave my number, and then I was really encouraged that everyone around the table gave really high numbers. The most quoted number was 8, and it was interesting to me and really encouraging because they're all going through really hard life trials right now, but they were able to see something positive about their week, even in light of having, many of them had teenagers or young adults who were just living right in the middle of their addiction, and some really hard things had happened, and one had gone inpatient and one had relapsed, and they were still able to have hope and say, their week was an 8, even though their loved one had had a hard week. And then this was different than the typical group. As the leader explained, they had a young man who came and shared about his battle with addiction. So he gave his testimony for about 30 or 40 minutes. And that was unusual, but really great. So she said, typically it's more of a support group, and the group members will talk about what has been difficult about their week or things they want to talk through with others that understand. But this was more of just us, other than that beginning opening round, he shared, and it was really emotional. I could tell that it was striking a nerve with several of the parents in the room as he talked about things that his parents had gone through and his many, many relapses for his 25-year battle with addiction. But he's been clean for 2 years, and he attributes that to God and finding the Hope is Alive program. And he actually now works for Hope is Alive in their graphic design department. So his story was really powerful. It was emotional. And it was such a huge reminder to me of how God is always working in our lives, and how, this man just talked over and over about moments that God reached out to him, and he either listened or he shoved it away. But when the time was right, he turned to God, and his life was really changed. And so that was really powerful. And my takeaway from that night was just that every story matters. I just loved hearing his story and hearing the stories kind of woven through the people's answer in their icebreaker at the beginning, their round. Just that their stories matter. These are real people in our lives. And then the NA group was a little bit more just cut and dry. It was interesting because my only assumptions, I think I say this on the next slide actually, but so I'll just say my only point of reference was TV and movies of what they say about an AA or an NA movie or NA meeting. And it was pretty similar, but I would say there were about 12 to 15 people, I didn't count, in a basement room and a long table. And I know this person was the leader, but it was different because he didn't really make it known that he was the leader. He's just the one that came up and introduced himself. And then my friend introduced me. And then the group members did a check-in. I didn't talk during this meeting. I just listened and respectfully just listened to the things that they had to say. But they did a check-in, and they kind of did the traditional hi, my name is so-and-so, and they would either say I'm an addict, or there were a couple different ways that they phrased things, but there was kind of that traditional acknowledging that you're powerless over the addiction. And so I could see the 12-step kind of feel through that meeting. And then the check-in took a while because some of them told longer stories, and it was just kind of popcorn style. It didn't go around the table. Some people talked about getting their chip or how long they'd been sober. And then the group leader read a meditation from the book called Just for Today. And it's a daily meditations for those working the 12-step program. It was my first exposure to that. And then the members just took turns talking about how that specific meditation impacted them, and it wasn't mandatory to talk, and the hour went quickly, and so at the end of the time, the leader dismissed, and people stayed around and talked. My takeaway from that night was it just takes so much courage to admit your shortcomings, and that we all have them, and I wonder how different we would be if we all regularly admitted our shortcomings and our powerlessness. There was such a humble attitude, and I'll share that in my next. slide. The feelings, or I guess I talk about that later, but there was a feeling of humility was what I was going to say between both groups, honestly. So my personal reflections and then my assumptions going in. So the 12-step group, I felt, I think, more nervous walking into it. My stomach felt fluttery. I felt like this shyness kind of go over me. And I'm not sure why. I think maybe because I was aware that I'm the outsider here, and not in like a rude, exclusive kind of way, but more of a respectful way of like these, the members of this group are letting me in and letting me be here. And this is a sacred space. And so I just felt honored to be there, but nervous. I appreciated the respect that was given to each person. You know, there was a man in like a business suit, and then someone that looked, you know, not to stereotype, but had the look of like possibly could be homeless or something. And there was just no like hierarchy in that room. It was just a mutual respect. The emphasis on spirituality was really special. And it was obvious that the group is life-changing for the members. Like they look forward to it. They talk about it. They need it. And that was very humbling and really just special to see. The Finding Hope meeting, I also felt a little nervous, but it was more related to just going to a new place, not knowing anyone in the room, walking in by myself. But as soon as I met the leader and the people in the room, I felt comfortable. They were very friendly. And I felt a sense of connection. And that's probably because I do have something in common with everyone in that room. And as they all talked about the struggle of having a family member who's touched by addiction, I mean, it really like made me kind of think about my dad and some of the feelings that I have. And he's a closet addict, so he just hides everything, and he doesn't, he would never go to a meeting like that. And so it just kind of triggered some of those feelings of like, I totally get what you're talking about, but he's not in that place to go. Same there was just an attitude of respect and the spiritual emphasis I loved, and the vulnerability. And it was obvious that this group is very impactful to one another. Like you could tell by some of the conversation, they've helped each other through really hard times. And then I think I mentioned this, the only assumptions I had regarding the NA meeting were based on TV and movies when they depict recovery groups. And it was actually kind of similar to that meeting. And then I expected the Finding Hope meeting to be more like group counseling or like a support group. And I think it normally is. But since they had the guest speaker, this one was just a little bit different. The similarities between the groups, I've mentioned it a little bit, but they both had such an attitude of humility. It felt vulnerable and real. Like the moment you walk in, you just are there for a purpose. There's not all the fluff. There's no pretending. It's just people who are there with struggles. And I actually really loved that. And again, I just kind of wish that we could bring that atmosphere into other spaces. And I just wonder what relationships would be like if we could just approach each other as fellow strugglers in this world. The 12-step meeting had more of like a teaching moment when he read from the Just for Today book, and then members shared. And so there was a little more of that. The support group felt more like group counseling at the beginning when we did the scaling question and did it around. But then the guest sharing his story kind of just felt like a testimony night at church or something where someone's just sharing their story. But the group seemed very grateful to have him there, and they were all like just very touched by his story. And you could tell it triggered a lot of their emotions because they live with addicted family members. So the impact that the groups had on me personally, I honestly thought about the people around that table at the NA meeting, as well as the man who shared his story at the Finding Hope meeting, for like days after. Like off and on, they would just come into my mind. And I think what impressed me was the vulnerability, and again, just the realness and the courage to say, I'm so-and-so and I'm powerless over this, and I need my higher power to help me through this. I feel also like I have a more thorough list of places that I can recommend to clients with addiction. I just, through my search and then talking with my practicum site and getting some information from other counselors there, I feel like I have such a great list now, and I'm so grateful to have places I can send clients. And then I just feel better equipped to work with clients battling addiction, not only from a theoretical perspective and through all the texts and things that we've learned this semester, but now just like hearing stories put flesh and blood on and faces on the people that I've been reading about and hearing about their dynamics, their complexities of life, the family systems, and the physical health that they would go through. It was just eye-opening, and really that connects over to the connections to our course material as well, because like I said, it just put faces to the case studies that we've read about. And then listening to tales in both meetings, honestly, of, rehab, relapse, withdrawal symptoms, the emotional toll that it takes on these people, like, it helped me understand better just the complexity of addiction. And we've read it in our text, both in the addictions book and our MI textbook, and the videos that we've watched. Like, the information was here, but it just put like real people in front of me and gave me a deeper understanding. And then of course I mentioned the support group used scaling as their opener and did a round, and I instantly was like, I know what that is. So that was kind of fun to have the head knowledge that went along with the experience. And then lastly, the utilization of the 12 steps in my groups. So the 12 steps are the guiding principles that help people with addiction achieve and maintain sobriety. And so for the NA group, they were posted on the wall, and they were also referenced when the reader read from the daily meditation in Just for Today. It's a book of daily short readings for those who are working the 12 steps and also working to stay sober. And then it was also referenced when the group members gave their updates. In the Finding Hope support group, there was no reference to the 12 steps, but I would assume that most of the people there know what it is because they have family members that are living with addiction. And then in my other research, I researched Celebrate Recovery, and I really wanted to attend one of those meetings, but wasn't able to. But that is a Christ-centered 12-step program, and they specifically give glory to Jesus Christ as their higher power, not just an unnamed higher power. So I just love that the 12 steps are such a powerful tool that was created so long ago, and they are continuing to help so many people just achieve and maintain sobriety. And then I love, as a believer myself, that the ability to bring Jesus into the 12 steps. So thank you very much for listening. If you are interested in either of the meetings that I mentioned, those are the websites. The Finding Hope is through Hope is Alive, and then the NA meeting was just available through Narcotics Anonymous or narcotics.com. Okay, thank you.